The cockpit of a commercial turboprop is a small, predictable world of checklists and regional schedules until the moment a man with a heavy coat and a heavier silence sits in the jump seat and places a silenced Makarov on the pedestal. It is a rainy Tuesday in a crumbling post-Soviet satellite state, and you are 3 minutes from taxiing. He doesn't look at the instruments. He looks at you. He tells you that your co-pilot has already been compensated to walk away, and that if you touch the radio for anything other than a standard departure clearance, your family's apartment in the city center will be leveled before you reach 10,000 feet. You realize in the span of a single heartbeat that your career as a legitimate aviator ended the second he closed the cockpit door. You don't scream and you don't pray. You simply begin the engine start sequence because the cold logic of survival has replaced the flight manual. You fly him through a mountain pass so narrow the proximity alarms scream until you manually override them, landing on a dirt strip guarded by men in mismatched fatigues and high-end tactical gear. When the engines shut down, a man in a tailored charcoal suit approaches the wing. He doesn't thank you. He hands you a satellite phone and a set of coordinates for a Gulfstream parked in a hangar 300 miles away. You are no longer a pilot for a regional carrier. You are now the primary logistical asset for a shadow network of men who are erased from history books but written into the black ledgers of international tribunals. Your life becomes a series of pressurized tubes and lawless horizons. You learn quickly that flying for the world's most wanted war criminals isn't about the glamour of private jets. It is about the cold math of fuel reserves, radar gaps, and the weight of human lives you were paid to ignore. Your first major assignment is moving a former defense minister from a collapsing Balkan state to a safe house in North Africa. The cargo is not just the man, but the 4 heavy crates of encrypted hard drives he carries, containing the locations of mass graves that could topple a dozen governments. You are flying a modified IL-76, a beast of an aircraft that smells of hydraulic fluid and stale tobacco. Mid-flight, over the Mediterranean, a pair of unidentified interceptors appear on your TCAS. They aren't squawking, and they aren't responding to hails. Your passenger enters the cockpit, his face a mask of practiced cruelty, and tells you that if you are forced down, he will detonate a thermite charge on the hard drives, and you will go down with the ship. You have to decide between the safety of international aviation law and the suicidal desperation of your employer. You choose the latter, diving the massive freighter into a thick bank of storm clouds, pushing the airframe past its structural limits. The rivets groan, a sound like 1,000 tiny gunshots, but you emerge on the other side, alone. You have saved a man responsible for the deaths of thousands, and your reward is a wire transfer to a Swiss account that makes your previous annual salary look like pocket change. Years pass, and the names of your passengers change, but the stakes only escalate. You become a specialist in the gray zone, the space between sovereign airspaces where transponders are turned off and flight plans are works of fiction. You find yourself sitting across from men whose faces are blurred on Interpol notices, discussing the climb gradient of a loaded Global Express out of a high-altitude runway in the Andes. You learn to read the tension in their shoulders. Some are stoic, resigned to their eventual capture or assassination. Others are manic, fueled by stimulants and the fading high of absolute power. You manage their paranoia as much as you manage the aircraft. When a deposed warlord suspects his mistress of being an informant, he looks to you for a confirmation of her nervousness during the flight. You remain a silent, technical extension of the machine. You understand that your value lies in your lack of a moral compass. If you show a flicker of judgment, you become a liability. And in this world, liabilities are jettisoned at 40,000 feet. You develop a strategy for every contingency. If the landing gear fails, you have a list of clandestine strips where the local militia is paid more than the government. If a passenger dies mid-flight, you know which jurisdictions will accept a bribe to look the other way during the offloading. The psychological toll manifests in a hyperfixation on the technical. You find yourself obsessing over the weight and balance of the aircraft, calculating the exact amount of fuel needed to reach a secondary neutral country if your primary destination is compromised by a coup. You move a general from a Southeast Asian junta who insists on bringing 3 crates of gold bullion. The weight is nearly 3 tons over the maximum takeoff limit for the short, humid runway. You have to explain the physics of density altitude to a man who has ordered the burning of entire villages. You tell him that either the gold stays or he dies on the fence line. He stares at you, a man used to getting his way through violence, but he sees the data on your tablet. He leaves 2 crates behind, and as you rotate the nose and feel the wheels clear the trees by a matter of inches, you realize you are the only person in the world who can tell this man no. It is a dangerous kind of power, a technical dominance that makes you feel untouchable. But the feeling is an illusion. You are a high-value target for every intelligence agency on the planet. You stop sleeping in hotels, preferring the crew lounge of private hangars where you can keep an eye on the fuel trucks. You trust no one, least of all the mechanics you pay in cash to perform midnight inspections. By your 10th year, you are operating a fleet of 3 aircraft, all registered to shell companies in nations that don't exist on most maps. You were tasked with the extraction of a high-ranking intelligence officer from a Middle Eastern regime that is currently being bombed by a coalition of Western powers. The mission is a dark arrival into a city with no functioning air traffic control and a sky filled with Reaper drones and surface-to-air missile batteries. You were flying a blackened King Air, low enough to clip the antennas on the rooftops. The moral dilemma is no longer about the passenger's crimes. It is about the collateral damage of your survival. To avoid a radar lock, you have to fly a path that takes you directly over a civilian hospital, knowing that the anti-aircraft fire directed at you will likely fall back onto the building. You don't hesitate. You bank the plane, the G-forces pinning you into the seat, and execute the maneuver. The passenger is on board within 90 seconds of your wheels touching the tarmac. As you climb out, you see the flashes of explosions behind you. You have facilitated the escape of the man who designed the torture protocols for the regime, and you did it by using a hospital as a shield. The weight of this choice sits in your gut like lead, but your hands remain steady on the yoke. You are a professional, and in your world, professionalism is the only thing that keeps the noose from tightening. The complexity of your role grows as the international community tightens their grip. The wanted lists become shorter as your clients are hunted down one by one. You become the final lifeline for the desperate. You were contacted by a middleman for a former African president who has been indicted for crimes against humanity. He is trapped in a bunker as rebel forces close in. The price for his extraction is $50 million, half up front. You know that the rebels have man-portable air defense systems and that the airspace is being monitored by satellite. This isn't a flight, it's a gamble with a 90% chance of failure. You spend 48 hours studying infrared signatures and the heat bloom patterns of the local terrain. You decide to fly in through a massive sandstorm, using synthetic vision and terrain-following radar to navigate the blindness. The turbulence is violent enough to crack the side windows, and the engines are swallowing grit that could flame them out at any second. You land in the middle of a dirt road, the wings nearly touching the dunes on either side. The passenger is a broken man, smelling of sweat and fear, clutching a briefcase like a holy relic. During the flight to a non-extradition country, he tries to justify his actions to you, speaking of national stability and necessary evils. You don't respond. You simply adjust the mixture of the engines. You are not his confessor. You are his chariot. The long-term consequences of your career begin to catch up with you, not through a missile, but through the slow erosion of your identity. You no longer have a home, only a series of temporary apartments under different aliases. Your original passport is a relic of a dead man. You see your face on a persons of interest slide during a leaked intelligence briefing on the dark web. They don't know your name, but they know your tail numbers. You were forced to burn 2 of your aircraft, scuttling them in deep water off the coast of Indonesia to erase the trail. The financial rewards are staggering, yet there is nothing to buy that can't be seized.
You realize that you are just as much a prisoner as the men you fly. Your freedom is limited to the cockpit and the 6 miles of air between the ground and the stratosphere. You start to see the faces of the victims in the clouds, the families from the Balkan graves, the villagers from the junta's fires. You tell yourself it's just hypoxia or fatigue, but the moral tension is a structural crack in your psyche that no amount of maintenance can mix. Your final mission involves a man who was once the most powerful figure in a European shadow state, a man who orchestrated a genocide with the stroke of a pen. He is old now, dying of cancer, and wants to spend his last days in a mountain retreat in a country that will never hand him over. The flight is long, crossing multiple sensitive borders. Halfway through, you receive a coded message on your secure link. A strike team is waiting at your destination. Your employer has been sold out by his own inner circle. You have 2 choices. You can land and be captured